The next step in scene layout for our product visualization project is to establish the camera framing with a physical camera. That's going to depend upon the aspect ratio of the rendering. Let's set that up in the Render Setup dialog. Click Render Setup on the main toolbar. And in the Common tab, in the Output Size section, let's set both the width and the height to 540 pixels, and that will give us a square aspect. Type in 540, press Tab, type in 540, and press Enter. Now we have an image aspect of 1 and a pixel aspect of 1. Close the Render Setup dialog. We want to create a physical camera, and to make it easier on ourselves, let's snap to 3D grid points. So enable 3D snaps, and then back out in the top viewport, zoom out with Control, Alt, and middle mouse button, and pan or track with the middle mouse button. And let's create a physical camera in that top viewport. Go to the Create panel, and choose the Cameras panel. Click on the button labeled Physical, and then over in the top view, click on this center line here, which is the y-axis of the world, and then drag closer to the geometry, but don't quite reach the geometry, just so we'll be able to select that target a little bit more easily in the future. Release the mouse. That camera and its target have been created. Right-click to exit out of physical camera creation. Let's load that camera into one of the viewports. We can sacrifice this front viewport here. Click on the viewport name, which is Front, and choose Cameras, Phys Camera 001. Now we're looking through that camera's lens. We want to enable safe frames so we get an accurate representation of the framing. Go over to that viewport label once again and enable Show Safe Frames. We additionally want this to be a shaded view, so we can toggle the wireframe display with F3, and now we're in a default standard shaded view. We can interactively dolly the camera back. We've got a button down here, which is Dolly Camera. Click on that and we can click and drag in this camera viewport to dolly back. We can also pan or position or track with the middle mouse button, and we can sort of intuitively frame our shot. But I want this to be very precise, and I actually know exactly where I want the camera and its target to be. So I'm just going to plug those values in, and it'll be easier to see over here in the left viewport. So I'll go back to the Select Object tool, and then dolly back in the left view with Control, Alt, and middle mouse, and pan with the middle mouse. Select that camera if it's not already selected. Grab the Move tool, and just plug in these values here. We'll give it an X value of 0, a Y value of -50 centimeters. Press Tab and set the Z value to 11 centimeters. Now that camera is positioned where I want it to be. Let's also position the target. Select that target, and we've got some values to type in once again, with an X value of 0, a Y value of -5, which I just coincidentally happen to have here. We want a Y value of -5, and then a Z value of 10 centimeters. And I've set it up this way so that the camera is just slightly above the top of the radio. So we'll be able to see the top of the radio. Now we want to zoom in with the camera's lens, and that's an optical effect of field of view. We'll go back to the Select Object tool, select the camera, go over to the Modify panel, and we can zoom in by specifying a field of view in degrees. So enable Specify FOV. We can click and drag on that spinner to zoom in or out. Let's set the field of view to 15 degrees and press Enter. Now I mostly have the framing that I want, although as you can see, we've cropped off the bottom of our subject here. With a physical camera, we can simulate a view camera, also known as a tilt-shift camera, in which we can offset the camera's lens from its sensor. And that's accomplished in the Modify panel. Scroll down, open up Perspective Control, and we have Lens Shift Horizontal and Vertical. If we click and drag on the spinner for the vertical lens shift, we can see what's happening here. We're able to reposition the frame without changing the camera's position. Let's set the vertical lens shift amount to 35. All right, that's really a perfect framing for this. The last touches to our layout will involve setting up a ground plane and also just rotating our helper. Let's grab that helper and rotate it. Let's plug in a value here in the Z rotation field. Let's give it a value of 30 degrees. We also need a ground plane for the floor. So go back to the Create panel, to Geometry, Standard Primitives, Plane. Click and drag to create that in the top viewport. Right-click to exit creation mode. Select the Move tool. Set its position to the origin, X, Y, and Z values all of 0. With that plane still selected, go into the Modify panel, and we'll just change up its length and width. Give it a length of 50 centimeters. Press Tab and give it a width of 70 centimeters, making it extra wide, just to make sure that if we later change the aspect ratio, the plane will be actually wider than the available field of view. Okay, we've completed the scene layout phase, and in the next movie we'll look at setting up Arnold for draft and production quality renderings.